Maya Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead as she watched the leaderboard update for the 100th time that day. Her name sat firmly at position 99 out of 100 candidates, a crushing reminder that she barely qualified for the Galactic Combat Trials. The holographic display flickered in the sterile waiting chamber beneath the arena, showing the top performers with their impressive scores and alien physiologies that seemed designed for warfare. The Zephyrian in first place possessed 6 arms and reflexes that made lightning seem slow. The Carathian champion in second had armor-like skin that could deflect plasma rounds. Even the human in 10th place was a genetically enhanced super soldier from the Mars colonies, standing 7 feet tall with muscles like twisted steel cables. Maya looked down at her own ordinary hands, calloused from years of working in the asteroid mining stations. At 24, she was considered old for a first-time trial participant. Most species began their warriors' training in childhood, but humans from the outer rim rarely got such opportunities. Her acceptance letter had been a miracle, or perhaps a clerical error. "Attention, candidates," the artificial voice echoed through the chamber. "Final trial preparation begins in 30 minutes. Report to equipment stations for standard gear assignment." Around her, beings from dozens of worlds began moving toward the armory alcoves. Maya joined the flow, her heart hammering against her ribs. The equipment station scanned her biometrics and dispensed a basic energy rifle, light armor plating, and an emergency beacon. Standard gear for standard expectations. The Thraxian beside her received heavy artillery that required 4 arms to operate effectively. The crystalline Vorthon collected specialized frequency weapons that resonated with their natural harmonic abilities. Maya's human equipment looked pitiful in comparison, designed for a species that most galactic civilizations considered unremarkable at best. Chen. Maya. Human. Earth Colony Designation, Series 7. The technician barely looked up from his datapad. "You're assigned to Survival Sector Delta 7. Objective is simple. Last 72 hours in the environment while avoiding elimination. The sector contains 1 apex predator. Avoid contact at all costs." Maya nodded, though her mouth had gone dry. Apex predators were the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, used specifically to test the survival instincts and combat readiness of potential galactic peacekeepers. Most were the size of small buildings, with intelligence that rivaled sentient species and hunting abilities that had evolved over millions of years. The transport pod hummed as it carried her toward the designated sector. Through the porthole, she could see the arena's vast landscape, a carefully constructed ecosystem that spanned several hundred square kilometers. Forests gave way to rocky canyons, which opened into crystalline caves and toxic marshlands. Somewhere in Sector Delta 7, an apex waited. The pod touched down in a clearing surrounded by towering purple trees with silver bark. The moment the door hissed open, Maya felt the weight of the alien atmosphere. Slightly higher gravity than Earth normal, with an oxygen content that made her lungs work harder. The air tasted metallic, carrying scents that had no earthly equivalent. Her equipment registered the environmental conditions and automatically adjusted her armor's internal atmosphere. 72 hours. She checked her chronometer and began moving toward what looked like defensible high ground. The rifle felt unfamiliar in her hands, nothing like the mining equipment she was used to operating. A distant roar echoed across the landscape, deep enough to vibrate through her bones. Maya froze, every instinct screaming danger. That wasn't just any sound. It carried intelligence, purpose, and a threat that transcended species barriers. The apex had announced its presence. She changed direction, moving away from the sound while trying to remember everything she'd learned about survival in hostile environments. Find shelter, secure water, establish escape routes, avoid detection. The mining colonies hadn't prepared her for this, but they had taught her patience and careful observation. Hours passed as Maya worked her way through the alien forest. The trees grew closer together as she climbed, their silver bark smooth and strangely warm to the touch. She found a rocky outcropping that offered good visibility and began setting up a basic shelter, using her armor plates and some fallen branches. As the local sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Maya heard something that made her blood freeze. Not the apex's roar this time, but something smaller, more vulnerable. A crying sound that seemed to come from just beyond the tree line. She crept toward the noise, rifle ready, and discovered something that changed everything. 3 small creatures huddled in a natural hollow between 2 massive tree roots. They were clearly juveniles of some species, covered in soft gray fur and making distressed vocalizations. Their eyes were large and luminous, reflecting the fading light. Maya's breath caught as she recognized the body structure. These were apex cubs, though they appeared to be alone and frightened. The powerful predator that had roared earlier was their parent, and somehow they had been separated. According to everything she knew about galactic combat doctrine, her best strategy was to leave immediately. Apex adults were fiercely protective of their young, and getting between them was suicide for even the most experienced warriors. But looking at the tiny creatures, Maya felt something that had nothing to do with tactical thinking. The cubs were shivering in the dropping temperature, clearly too young to regulate their body heat effectively. One appeared injured, favoring its left front limb. Their cries grew weaker as exhaustion set in. Maya made a decision that would have horrified her instructors. She approached slowly, hands empty, speaking in the soft tones she'd used with injured animals back on Series 7. The cubs watched her with curious wariness, but didn't flee. When she offered a piece of emergency ration, the smallest one approached tentatively. Within an hour, she had all 3 cubs sheltered in her makeshift camp. They responded well to her presence, seeming to recognize that she meant no harm. The injured one allowed her to examine its leg, which appeared to be sprained but not broken. Using medical supplies from her kit, Maya created a simple splint. As the alien night deepened, the cubs curled up against her for warmth. Maya sat with her back against a tree, rifle across her knees, listening to their soft breathing and wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Somewhere in the darkness, she could hear the adult apex calling for its children. The sound was getting closer. Dawn came with the sound of massive footsteps crashing through the forest. Maya jerked awake, her hand automatically reaching for her rifle before she remembered the 3 small bodies pressed against her sides. The cubs stirred restlessly, making soft, chirping sounds that seemed to be responses to something she couldn't hear. The adult apex's calls had been growing closer throughout the night. Now, as pale morning light filtered through the silver-barked trees, Maya could hear the distinctive sound of vegetation being pushed aside by something enormous. Her scanner indicated the creature was roughly 200 meters away and approaching steadily. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. She could activate her emergency beacon and request extraction, but that would mean abandoning the cubs and automatically failing the trial. She could attempt to flee, but the cubs were too small to travel quickly, and the adult apex could certainly outrun a human carrying extra weight. She could stand and fight, but her standard-issue rifle would barely scratch a creature that size. Instead, she did something that went against every piece of tactical training she'd ever received. She stood up slowly, ensuring the cubs could see her movements, and began to gather her gear. But rather than preparing for combat or flight, she started making preparations for a meeting. Maya had spent years observing animal behavior in the asteroid mining stations, where various species were used for different purposes. She understood that most intelligent creatures, even predators, could recognize non-threatening behavior when it was genuine. The key was demonstrating that she posed no danger, while simultaneously showing that she cared for their young. She arranged her equipment in plain sight, placing the rifle several meters away with the power cell removed. Then she sat back down with the cubs, allowing them to climb on her while she spoke to them in gentle, soothing tones. The injured one had recovered enough to be more active, though it still favored its healing leg. The forest grew quiet, except for the approaching footsteps. Maya felt her heart hammering but forced herself to remain calm. The cubs needed to see her relaxed and unthreatened. If they sensed her fear, they might become agitated, which could trigger the adult's protective instincts in dangerous ways. When the apex finally emerged from the tree line, Maya had to fight every instinct not to run. The creature was magnificent and terrifying, standing nearly 4 meters tall, with a body that seemed designed by evolution for perfect lethality. Its fur was the same gray as the cub's but darker, with patterns that shifted subtly as it moved. 6 limbs moved with fluid grace, and its head was elongated with intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the scene. The apex stopped 20 meters away and let out a sound that was part roar, part complex vocalization. Maya realized it was trying to communicate, calling to its children while simultaneously issuing a warning to the strange creature that sat with them. Maya remained perfectly still as the cubs responded with excited chirps and began moving toward their parent. She felt a moment of sadness watching them go, but also relief that they would be reunited safely. The smallest cub reached the adult first and was immediately gathered up in a careful embrace of powerful arms. But then something unexpected happened. The injured cub, the one Maya had splinted and cared for, stopped halfway between her and its parent. It looked back at Maya, then at the adult apex, making a series of soft sounds that seemed almost conversational. The adult apex tilted its massive head, studying Maya with new intensity. It approached slowly, each step careful and deliberate. Maya could smell its scent now, wild and alien but not unpleasant. The creature lowered its head until it was at Maya's eye level, close enough that she could feel its breath. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Maya saw intelligence in those eyes, a depth of thought and emotion that reminded her that apex predators were not just animals, but highly evolved beings with complex social structures. The creature seemed to be weighing her actions, judging her intentions through some criteria she couldn't understand. Then, slowly, the apex extended one massive paw toward Maya. She held her breath as claws that could tear through armor plating touched her arm with incredible gentleness. The creature made a low, rumbling sound that somehow conveyed gratitude, recognition, and acceptance. The cubs gathered around them both, clearly comfortable with the interaction. Maya realized that she was experiencing something unprecedented in galactic history. Apex predators were known to form bonds with their own kind and occasionally with other species, but never with a being they had just met during what should have been a combat situation. Over the following hours, Maya found herself accepted into the apex family group. The adult, which she began thinking of as the mother based on protective behaviors, showed her safe paths through the forest and sources of fresh water. The cubs played around her feet as they traveled, treating her like an honorary pack member. Maya's equipment registered the passage of time, but she stopped worrying about the trial requirements. Instead, she focused on learning from the apex family. She observed how they communicated through sounds, scents, and subtle body language. She watched the mother demonstrate hunting techniques to the cubs, noting the incredible intelligence behind every movement. On the second night, as they sheltered in a natural cave formation, Maya realized she was witnessing something that researchers had theorized about but never documented. The apex were teaching her, sharing knowledge that had been passed down through generations of their kind. They showed her which plants were safe to eat, how to read the signs of weather changes, and ways to move through the environment without leaving traces. But more than practical knowledge, Maya felt she was receiving something deeper. The Apex family had accepted her not as a threat to be neutralized or a resource to be exploited, but as a member of their social group. They groomed her hair with careful claws, shared their food, and included her in their complex emotional communications. As the trial's final day approached, Maya faced a choice that would define not just her future, but potentially the relationship between humans and one of the galaxy's most feared species. She could return to the extraction point with unprecedented footage and data about Apex behavior, information that would revolutionize xenobiological understanding. Or she could stay with the family that had adopted her, learning secrets that no galactic citizen had ever been privileged to know. The decision was made for her when the mother approached with something in her massive paws. It was a small crystalline object that pulsed with soft internal light. Maya recognized it from her xenobiology studies as an apex memory stone, a way their species shared important experiences across generations. As the mother pressed the stone into Maya's hands, she understood that she was being trusted with something beyond value. The weight of that trust, and the knowledge that she now carried, would change everything about how the galaxy viewed both humans and apex predators. The extraction alarm echoed across Sector Delta 7 as Maya's 72 hours approached their end. She stood at the edge of the cave system where she had spent her final night with the Apex family, the memory stone warm in her palm and a weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders that felt heavier than the alien gravity. The mother Apex stood beside her, no longer the terrifying predator that Maya had first encountered, but a complex being with deep emotional intelligence and protective instincts that transcended species barriers. The cubs played nearby, occasionally running up to nuzzle against Maya's legs before returning to their games. Through the growing bond they had formed, Maya understood that the mother knew what the alarm meant. This was goodbye, though the concept of permanent separation seemed foreign to the Apex way of thinking. To them, once someone was family, distance was merely temporary. Maya activated her emergency beacon, signaling her location for pickup. According to her equipment, she was one of only 37 candidates still active in the trials. Most had either been eliminated by environmental hazards, failed to complete their objectives, or requested early extraction when confronted by their assigned apex predators. The transport pod's engines grew louder as it approached the landing zone Maya had designated. She could see it through the trees, a sleek vessel that represented return to civilization and everything she had known before these 3 days that had changed her understanding of the universe. Before leaving the cave, Maya took one final scan with her equipment, recording the crystalline formations and unique mineral deposits that the Apex had shown her. The family had guided her to places in the ecosystem that official surveys had never documented, revealing a complex network of caves and underground passages that suggested the Apex were not just inhabitants of this environment, but active guardians of its ecological balance. The mother Apex made a series of complex vocalizations that Maya was beginning to understand as more than simple animal communication. The sounds carried layers of meaning about duty, honor, and the responsibility that came with knowledge. Maya realized she was receiving final instructions, a commission of sorts to carry what she had learned back to the wider galaxy. As they emerged from the caves, Maya saw the extraction team waiting near the transport pod. 3 figures in standard galactic peacekeeping uniforms, their body language suggesting surprise and wariness at seeing her emerge from the forest in the company of an Apex family rather than hiding from them. The lead officer, a Centaurian with the distinctive blue-scaled skin of his species, stepped forward with his scanner active. "Candidate Chen, please approach for extraction and debriefing. Move away from the hostile entities and proceed to the transport immediately." Maya felt the mother Apex tense beside her, recognizing the tone of command even if the words were unfamiliar. The cubs moved closer to their parent, sensing the change in atmosphere. Maya raised her hand in a gesture for patience, knowing that any sudden movement could escalate the situation dangerously. "They're not hostile," Maya called back, her voice carrying clearly across the clearing. "I need to speak with the trial supervisors immediately. There's been a significant development that will affect galactic policy regarding apex predators." The Centaurian officer consulted his datapad, clearly confused by the situation. "Candidate Chen, you were assigned a survival trial with standard parameters. Please explain your current circumstances and why you appear to be in non-aggressive contact with Category 5 predators." Maya looked back at the mother apex, seeing understanding in those intelligent eyes. The creature knew that Maya had to leave, had to return to her own kind, but there was also trust there. Trust that Maya would use what she had learned wisely. "I'll need to provide a full report," Maya said, walking slowly toward the transport while the apex family remained at the forest edge. "But the short version is that apex predators are not the mindless killing machines we've believed them to be. They're highly intelligent, with complex social structures and emotional depth that rivals any sentient species in the galaxy." She paused at the transport ramp, turning back one final time to the family that had adopted her. The smallest cub, the one she had first befriended with emergency rations, broke away from the group and bounded toward her. Maya knelt down as the cub reached her, allowing it to press its small head against her chest in what she had learned was an apex expression of affection and farewell. The extraction team watched in amazement as Maya gently embraced the cub before standing and watching it return to its family. The mother apex raised one massive paw in what could only be interpreted as a gesture of goodbye, while making a sound that seemed to carry across the forest with the weight of a promise. As the transport lifted off, Maya pressed her face to the porthole and watched the apex family until they disappeared into the forest canopy. In her hand, the memory stone pulsed with gentle light, containing experiences and knowledge that would soon reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about one of its most feared species. The flight back to the central processing station gave Maya time to organize her thoughts and prepare for the debriefing that would determine not just her own future, but potentially the future of human-apex relations. She had entered the trials as the 99th ranked candidate, someone barely qualified to participate in the galactic community's most prestigious selection process. Now she carried information that could prevent decades of unnecessary conflict and open possibilities for cooperation that no one had ever imagined. The memory stone contained not just her own experiences, but generations of apex knowledge about ecosystem management, sustainable resource development, and social structures based on cooperation rather than dominance. When the transport docked at the station, Maya was immediately escorted to a secure debriefing facility where a panel of officials from multiple galactic species waited to hear her report. As she began to describe her experiences, she watched their expressions change from skepticism to amazement to deep concern about the implications of what she was telling them. The Thraxian military advisor leaned forward as Maya described the apex teaching behaviors. "Are you suggesting that these predators were deliberately sharing tactical and survival knowledge with you? That level of cognitive function would classify them as sentient beings rather than dangerous animals." Maya held up the memory stone, its light casting shifting patterns on the conference room walls. "I'm suggesting that we've fundamentally misunderstood what apex predators are. They're not just sentient. They're sophisticated beings with their own culture, wisdom traditions, and social bonds that put many of our own species to shame." The implications hit the room like a shockwave. If apex predators were truly sentient, then decades of galactic policy treating them as environmental hazards would need to be completely reconsidered. The combat trials themselves, which used apex predators as obstacles to overcome, would be seen as fundamentally unethical. But Maya also knew that her experience represented an unprecedented opportunity. Humans, who had always been considered unremarkable in galactic society, had somehow achieved what no other species had managed. She had bridged the communication gap with beings that others saw only as threats. As the debriefing concluded and Maya was escorted to temporary quarters pending further evaluation, she realized that her ranking in the trials had become irrelevant. She might have been 99th out of 100 candidates, but she had accomplished something that would echo through galactic history. The memory stone pulsed gently in her hand, carrying within it the promise of a future where the roar of the apex would no longer be heard as a threat, but as a call for understanding between species that had more in common than anyone had ever imagined.